The local stonemason was a rather eccentric character by the name of Eric Flint. I questioned him at his place of work, a business that had been in his family for more than 3 centuries. In fact, his 2 sons were also both working there, and so I conducted the interview to the background sound of chisel on stone. Now, as I say, I didn't consider Mr. Flint a suspect. I just wanted information on that headstone. Mr. Flint, I wonder if you could help me. Do you recall selling a headstone recently with the name Dan D. Cheated on it? Aha! Ouch! Yes, I have. You can't forget a name like that. No, it's most unusual. I don't suppose you recall who you sold it to, do you? No, who did I sell it to? Oh! Who did I sell it to? Is that your question? Yes. Yes, I thought it was. Ouch! No, who did... Oh, I remember I sold it on a special. A special? Yep. Buy one, get one free. What? Buy 2 headstones? Yep. Ow! Yeah, it's an offer I've had for years. This is the first time anyone's taken it up, mind. Well, yes, I mean, who'd want to buy 2 headstones? I don't suppose you recall who the other headstone was for, do you? Hang on. A-B... It was Maureen someone. Maureen Peyton. That was it. Maureen Peyton? Ouch! So it was Frank Peyton who paid for the headstones, was it? Is he the murdered gardener? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Terrible business. I mean, this is Hopton St Mary's, not Lyme Regis. Roar! Yep, it was him. Paid for him, picked him up. Right. But even with your generous offer, those stones must have been expensive. Expensive? I'll say so. Top of the range they are. Polished marble. Ow! Right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Flynn. The time? I don't know. Midday, I guess. Usually is. Well, it was still only day 1 of my investigation, and already I was running out of ideas. And then my DS comes up with the idea of questioning the women in Frank Peyton's life. Now, sadly, his mother, Maureen, had passed away just a few weeks earlier. But, as we've already seen, there was his employer, the Reverend Davinia Collar. Now, as I think I've already said, I'm a tad nervous about taking on that role. But it gets worse. You will recall that Davinia had returned from a hen party that evening. We discovered that Frank had only recently split up with his childhood sweetheart, a young lady from the village by the name of Daisy Planter. Now, Daisy had moved away to London, where she'd met a wealthy businessman by the name of Mr. Mark Lloyd Hardwick Smythe, and the couple were set to get married in Hopton St Mary the following month. I wondered how Frank had taken that, so I wanted to question Daisy. Now, as it turns out, Daisy and Davinia were very close friends. In fact, they were the only 2 at the hen party. As I say, it was a very small village. And so we came up with the idea of interviewing the women at the same time. Well, you can probably see where this is going. And I'd just like to apologise in advance. And not only for my acting, but just in case my taking on these roles may offend any feminist sympathy. Anyway, this is my reenactment of my interview with the Reverend Davinia Collar and Miss Daisy Planter. First of all, can I just say thank you both very much, ladies, for coming in. I realise how difficult this must be for both of you. Miss Planter having lost your former boyfriend, and Reverend Collar, of course, your gardener. Oh, don't worry. I never really loved it. And gardeners are so easy to find, Inspector. Oh, right. Well, when did you last see Mr. Peyton alive? Day before he died. He called round to my place. Last chance to change my mind, he said. Oh, and he'd written me another one of his silly poems. A poem? What, he wrote poems, did he? Oh, he was always writing them. Dreadful they were. My life, my love, is in the pits. How I miss your lovely eyes. I mean, that's awful. Don't you agree, Inspector? Yes, I certainly do. I was already a bit nervous about the feminist angle.
He said we should get back together, but I told him straight. I said, Frank, I'm going to marry another man.
Oh, yes, congratulations, by the way. This is Mr. Mark Lloyd Hardwick Smythe?
That's right, he's lovely. We're getting married in May. I said to Frank, Mark's rich, and that's that.
Oh, and what did Mr. Peyton say to that?
He said he was rich as well, that his mum had left him a fortune, but it was just another one of his fantasies, like when he told me he'd hired a private detective.
Yes. And what about you, Reverend Collar? When did you last see Mr. Peyton?
Early in the morning on the day he died, may he rest in peace. He was working in the churchyard over by the trees.
Did he ask to use the vicarage that night?
No. He had a key, of course, but he knew I'd be out at Daisy's hen party. In fact, I was out all day because Mark drove up from London and took us both out to lunch. I got to ride in his Jaguar. He would have stayed longer, but he got a business call, and it must have been quite important because he went quite pale, and then he paid and said he had to leave.
Oh dear, what a shame. Well, look, if there's anything else you can think of, you know where we are.
Well, there was one thing, Inspector. I thought it was rather strange at the time, but after his phone call, Mark asked me what my bishop was like. And what with, you know...
Yes, that is odd. Yes, well, I think we should take a quick break before we go to the next interview. But I'd just like you to take a look at a couple of things in the meantime. The first is a newspaper cutting from the Hopton Gazette which shows the wedding of Daisy and Mr. Hardwick Smythe. Now, this was one of the most curious things I've ever seen in all my years on the force. We discovered that there was a load of flowers sprinkled on the ground in the shape of a phone number. Now, on close inspection, we found out that they weren't sprinkled on the ground at all. They were growing there. They were daisies, planted in the ground, growing in the shape of a phone number. Well, of course, we called that number time and time again. My hope was that someone would answer it, but no, it was always a recorded message. Worse still, in this day and age, you'd think that you could trace the owner of a mobile phone number. Not so on a pay-as-you-go contract. So, we have no idea who owns that phone, and the message itself just made no sense. In fact, have a listen yourself. Here it is.
Count on me for the key. Every fourth, then you'll see. Goodbye.
Count on me for the key. Oh, the other thing I'd like you to look at is the speed camera evidence. Now, one of the routine things we do on an investigation like this is to put in for any speed camera activity. You never know, might just throw something up. So I put in a request with the local force, but I heard nothing back. Now, there are 3 speed cameras around Hopton, so I just assumed there was no activity that evening. Turns out the local force had simply forgotten about it. It wasn't until we mentioned the reenactment to them that they sent this out to me. Now, you can find the speed camera evidence in the paperwork. Oh, and if you've got this far and you haven't bought the paperwork yet, I mean, what's your problem? Anyway, look, have a butcher's at that, and I'll see you in the next video.
Next time, in the final episode, D.I. Butler reenacts his interviews with Lothario and Butcher, Phil Lean, innocent shopper Natalie Longbottom, and eccentric Colonel Ivor Goodear. Don't miss the disappointing conclusion to the lockdown murder mystery.